Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Bianca Jones had reached that tender age of 45 where life had taught her to expect little and appreciate much. Her fingers, you see, had become instruments of knowledge calloused from years of wandering forest floors, trained to distinguish between the deadly and the divine among mushrooms that most folks would never dare to touch. She lived small, as they say. A cottage that barely held two people comfortably, shelves lined with field guides and mason jars filled with dried specimens. Her life had contracted like morning glory petals at dusk ever since Sarah left 5 years now, though who's counting? The seasons when they all blur together in solitude. That morning, as fog clung to the coastline like a lover reluctant to part, Bianca prepared for what she assumed would be another routine whale-watching tour. Her backpack held the usual treasures: field notebooks, magnifying glass, small collecting bags, and sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. She had no way of knowing that the universe, patient and mysterious as always, had other plans. The tour boat bobbed gently at the harbor, and that's when she first laid eyes on Angela Parker. 19 years old, though she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had already tasted success and found it to her liking. Executive chef at the Harborview restaurant, the kind of establishment that draws food critics from San Francisco and beyond. Now, I must pause here to tell you something about first meetings, dear listeners. They rarely announce themselves with fanfare. More often, they slip into our lives like morning mist, unremarkable until suddenly, inexplicably, they change everything. Bianca noticed Angela's hands for chef's hands, scarred from countless hours wielding knives, marked by burns that told stories of passion pursued without hesitation. Those hands were sorting through a collection of mushrooms with the kind of reverence usually reserved for precious stones. "Those aren't safe for consumption," Bianca found herself saying, stepping closer. "Death caps, if I'm not mistaken." Angela looked up, her dark eyes flashing with something between irritation and curiosity. "I know exactly what they are," she replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. "I'm studying their cellular structure for a molecular gastronomy project." And so began their first conversation, a dance of expertise and ego, each woman testing the boundaries of the other's knowledge. They spoke of foraging ethics, of the delicate balance between tradition and innovation, of the way certain mushrooms could transport a diner to childhood, memories of forest walks with grandparents long since past. Asterisk, the whale-watching tour became secondary to their conversation, while other passengers pointed at distant spouts of water and exclaimed over marine life. Bianca and Angela found themselves gravitating toward the boat's quiet stern, their voices lowered to the intimate register of people sharing secrets. "I've been foraging since I was 12, Bianca offered, her usual guardedness beginning to soften. "My grandmother taught me to read the forest like others read books." Angela's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her features. "My Nona used to take me mushroom hunting in Tuscany. She died when I was 16, but I still dream about those morning walks, the way the earth smelled after rain." There it was, the thread that would weave their lives together. Shared loss, shared passion, the recognition of kindred spirits who understood that some knowledge could only be gained through patience, through failure, through the willingness to trust what others might fear. When the tour ended, they found themselves reluctant to part. Angela suggested coffee, but Bianca countered with something more meaningful. "Would you like to see my workshop?" Asterisk, Bianca's cottage revealed itself like a carefully guarded secret. Dried mushrooms hung in bundles from the ceiling, their earthy perfume filling every corner. Notebooks lay open on every surface, filled with sketches and observations collected. Over decades of patient study, Angela moved through the space with the wonder of someone discovering a hidden world. She touched things gently, specimens preserved in amber-colored jars, reference books worn soft from handling, photographs of mushrooms so perfectly captured they seemed ready to release their spores. "This is extraordinary," Angela whispered, her chef's precision temporarily replaced by childlike awe. "You've created a library of knowledge that most people never even know exists." Bianca watched her young visitor, noting the way Angela's fingers traced the spines of field guides, the reverent way she examined dried specimens. There was something stirring in Bianca's chest, an emotion she had carefully buried beneath years of routine and solitude. "Would you like to try something?" Bianca asked, moving to her kitchen. From the refrigerator, she retrieved a collection of mushrooms that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Oyster mushrooms, chanterelles, and something very special, matsutake, that I found just yesterday. What followed was a collaboration that neither woman could have anticipated. Angela's knife skills transformed the humble fungi into precise, elegant cuts, while Bianca shared the stories each mushroom carried, where it was found, what conditions allowed it to thrive, how indigenous peoples had used it. For generations, they cooked together in a dance of complementary expertise. Angela's classical training merged with Bianca's intuitive understanding of each ingredient's essential nature. The matsutake released its complex perfume cinnamon and forest floor, and something indefinably wild. "Taste this," Angela said, holding a forkful toward Bianca's lips. The gesture was innocent enough, but something electric passed between them as Bianca parted her lips. As Angela's fingers lingered near her mouth, the mushroom was transcendent, earthy, and sophisticated, familiar yet exotic. But it was the intimacy of being fed by those skilled chef fingers that made Bianca's breath catch, that made her suddenly aware of how long it had been since anyone had cared enough to nourish her. Asterisk days began to blur together in the most wonderful way. Angela found reasons to visit Bianca's workshop, questions about unusual specimens, requests for foraging advice, eventually just the desire to spend time in a space that felt separate from the demanding pace of restaurant life. Bianca, for her part, discovered herself awakening from a hibernation she hadn't realized she'd entered. Colors seemed more vivid, food tasted more complex. Even her solitary walks through the forest carried a new sense of anticipation, as if she were gathering stories to share with someone who would truly understand. They established a routine that felt both casual and precious. Angela would arrive after the lunch service, still carrying traces of kitchen aromas, garlic and herbs, and the metallic scent of professional cooking. Bianca would prepare tea, and they would sit in the garden, discussing everything from mycology to philosophy to the weight of ambition in a small coastal town. "Sometimes I feel trapped here," Angela confessed one afternoon, her voice carrying a restlessness that Bianca recognized. "I'm 23 years younger than my sous chef, and every day I have to prove that I deserve my position." Bianca studied her companion's profile, noting the determined set of her jaw, the way her hands moved expressively, even when discussing frustration. "Achievement at your age must feel both exhilarating and isolating," she observed. "Exactly." Angela turned to meet her eyes. "You understand that in a way most people don't. You've built something remarkable here, something that's entirely your own." The compliment touched something tender in Bianca's chest. She had spent so many years thinking of her work as valuable but unrecognized, meaningful but ultimately solitary. To have someone see it, truly see it, felt like discovering that. She had been holding her breath for years. The evening it happened, autumn had painted the coastal air with the scent of wood smoke and changing leaves. Angela had stayed later than usual, helping Bianca organize a new collection of specimens. Their hands brushed, reaching for the same jar, and instead of the usual quick apology, they both stilled. "Bianca," Angela said softly, her voice carrying a question that didn't need words. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like the passionate encounters of novels or films. It was tender, questioning, flavored with the herbal tea they had shared, and the uncertainty of two women discovering something neither had planned for. Bianca's 45-year-old heart thundered with the ferocity of someone half her age. Angela's lips were soft, patient, carrying traces of the spearmint she chewed while cooking. When they parted, neither spoke for a long moment, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. "I should go," Angela whispered, but her hands remained on Bianca's waist, contradicting her words. "Should you?" Bianca asked, her voice barely audible. Instead of answering, Angela kissed her again, this time with more certainty, more hunger. Bianca responded with a passion that surprised them both, her careful, knowledgeable hands exploring the strong lines of Angela's shoulders, the elegant curve of her neck. Asterisk. What followed was a period of beautiful confusion. They didn't speak explicitly about what was happening between them, but their interactions took on new layers of meaning. Angela's visits became longer, more frequent. She began bringing ingredients from the restaurant, creating elaborate meals that they would share by candlelight in Bianca's small dining room. Bianca found herself paying attention to things she had ignored for years, the way her hair looked, whether her clothes were flattering, the state of her small cottage when viewed through a visitor's eyes. She felt simultaneously younger and more vulnerable than she had in decades. The physical intimacy developed slowly, with the patience of people who understood that some pleasures were worth savoring. Angela's chef fingers proved remarkably skilled at reading Bianca's responses, at finding the places that made her gasp with surprise and delight, but even in their most intimate moments, the weight of complication pressed against their happiness. The age difference that seemed insignificant in private became magnified in public spaces. Mendocino County was a small community where everyone knew everyone else's business, and two women in their situation would inevitably attract attention. People are going to talk, Bianca said one evening as they walked through town after dinner at a small cafe. Let them talk, Angela replied, but Bianca could hear the uncertainty beneath her bravado. The first real test came when they encountered a group of Angela's restaurant colleagues at the local market. The young woman's easy affection toward Bianca became stilted, formal, as if she were suddenly aware of how they might appear to others. That night, Bianca lay awake staring at her ceiling, wondering if she was being selfish to pursue something that might damage Angela's carefully built reputation. The crisis arrived, as they often do, through a series of small miscommunications that snowballed into something much larger. Angela had been featured in a food magazine article about rising young chefs, and in her enthusiasm she had mentioned her mentor, who was teaching her about wild mushrooms and foraging. The article caught the attention of a local food blogger, who became curious about this mysterious mentor. Through social media sleuthing and small-town gossip, they identified Bianca and began crafting a narrative that portrayed their relationship in the most sensational terms possible. 45-year-old mushroom expert seduces rising chef half. Her age. Read the blog headline that appeared 3 weeks later. Angela discovered the article first, her face pale with shock as she showed Bianca the phone screen. The piece was filled with innuendos, speculation, and photographs taken without permission, images of them walking together, laughing over coffee, embracing outside Bianca's cottage. This makes it sound like I'm some kind of predator, Bianca said, her voice hollow with hurt. We both know that's not true, Angela replied, but her tone carried a defensiveness that suggested she was already imagining how this would affect her professional reputation. The days that followed were strained. Angela's visits became less frequent, more careful. She stopped staying overnight, stopped bringing ingredients for elaborate meals. The easy intimacy they had developed began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. Their relationship might have ended there, killed by the toxic combination of gossip and fear, if not for an unexpected opportunity that arose for Angela. A prestigious restaurant group in Paris reached out, offering her a position that would allow her to develop her own concept of fine dining establishment focused on foraged ingredients and sustainable practices. This is what I've been working toward my entire career, Angela told Bianca, her excitement tempered by obvious conflict. But the timing feels perfect, Bianca finished quietly. This is your chance to escape all of this mess. Angela's eyes flashed with something that might have been hurt. Is that what you think? That I'm looking for an escape? They stood in Bianca's garden, the same space where they had shared so many peaceful afternoons, now feeling charged with unspoken accusations and disappointments. I think you're 24 years old with unlimited potential, Bianca said carefully. I think you deserve to pursue your dreams without being held back by complications. Complications, Angela repeated, her voice flat. Is that what I am? To you? The question hung between them like morning fog, obscuring the truth that neither was quite brave enough to speak aloud. After Angela's departure for Paris, Bianca returned to her familiar routines, but everything felt different. Her cottage seemed smaller, quieter, filled with memories that made even simple tasks feel laden with significance. She found herself avoiding certain places, the garden where they had shared tea, the kitchen where they had cooked together. Even the workshop where Angela had first shown such wonder at her collection. Weeks passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Bianca led foraging tours, updated her field notes, tended her specimens with the same careful attention she had always given them. But at night, lying alone in her bed, she was forced to confront the truth she had been avoiding. She had fallen in love with Angela Parker, completely and irrevocably, in a way that had nothing to do with age or circumstance, and everything to do with the recognition of a kindred spirit. The realization should have been liberating, but instead it felt like another weight to carry. What use was love that couldn't be spoken, couldn't be acted upon, couldn't bridge the gap between two lives moving in seemingly opposite directions. The first letter arrived 6 weeks after Angela's departure, postmarked from Paris and carrying the faint scent of foreign places. Bianca held it for a long time before opening it, afraid of what it might contain: politeness, finality, the kind of careful words people use to close chapters of their lives. Instead, she found something unexpected: vulnerability, longing, and the kind of detailed observations that suggested Angela had been paying attention to everything during their time together. "Dearest Bianca," the letter began, "Paris is everything I imagined and nothing like I expected. The kitchens here are temples to precision, but I find myself missing the intuitive way you approached ingredients. The stories you told about each mushroom's journey from forest floor to table. I've been working with some incredible chefs, learning techniques that would have seemed like magic just months ago. But every time I prepare a dish with wild mushrooms, I think about your hands guiding mine, your patient voice explaining the difference between varieties that look identical to untrained eyes. I know we didn't part on the best terms, and I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know that what we shared wasn't just important to me. It was transformative. You showed me that cooking could be about more than technique and ambition. You taught me to listen to ingredients, to respect their stories, to understand that the best meals are conversations between chef and nature. I hope your autumn foraging season is productive. I hope the matsutek are particularly abundant this year. I hope you know that someone in Paris thinks about you every morning while drinking coffee that tastes nothing like the tea we shared in your garden." The letter was signed simply Angela, but in the margins, she had sketched small drawings, mushrooms, cooking implements, even a tiny rendering of Bianca's cottage that captured details only someone who had spent real time there would remember. Bianca, read the letter 3 times before sitting down to compose her reply. Asterisk. What followed was a correspondence that neither woman had planned, but both desperately needed. Their letters became a safe space for honesty, for the kind of emotional intimacy that had been complicated by physical presence and social expectations. Bianca wrote about her daily walks through changing forests, about the species she was documenting, about the way certain places held memories of Angela's laughter. She shared her fears about growing older in solitude, her regrets about opportunities she had let pass by, her growing understanding that love was not something to be rationed based on practicality. Angela responded with stories from Paris, the eccentric chef who had become her mentor, the tiny apartment she was renting near the Marsh Opuses, the way she was learning to navigate a new language and culture. But between the lines of her adventures, Bianca could read a deeper story. Angela was homesick, not just for Mendocino County, but for the connection they had shared. "I've been thinking about what you said before I left," Angela wrote in her 4th letter, "about me being young with unlimited potential. You weren't wrong, but you also weren't entirely right. Yes, I have opportunities here that wouldn't exist anywhere else. But potential without purpose feels hollow. I'm learning incredible techniques, working with world-class ingredients, building the kind of resume that will open doors for the rest of my career. But every night I fall asleep wondering what good any of it is if I can't share it with the person who taught me that cooking is actually about love for ingredients, love for the process, love for the people you're nourishing. I know the age difference between us seems significant to other people. I know that our relationship challenges conventional expectations. But here's what I've learned in Paris. Unconventional doesn't mean wrong. Different doesn't mean impossible. Sometimes the most meaningful connections happen between people who have different amounts of life experience, who bring complementary strengths to each other's journeys. I don't know what this means for us, or if there even is an us anymore. But I needed you to know that what I felt for you wasn't the infatuation of someone too young to know better. It was recognition, the recognition of someone who saw me completely and loved what they saw. Someone who challenged me to be both more ambitious and more grounded. Someone whose presence made me feel more like myself than I had ever felt before. Asterisk Angela's 7th letter arrived on a cold December morning, thicker than the others and sealed with red wax that made Bianca's heart race with anticipation and anxiety. "Dearest Bianca," it began, "I have a proposition that might sound completely crazy, but I hope you'll hear me out before deciding. My mentor here has connections with a group of investors who are interested in funding a unique dining concept, a restaurant that would combine fine dining with education about sustainable foraging and mycology. The idea would be to create Not just a place where people eat, but where they learn about the origins of their food, about the delicate ecosystems that produce the ingredients we often take for granted. The investors are looking for someone with deep expertise in mushroom identification and foraging, someone who could develop educational programs, lead workshops, maybe even write a book about the intersection of fine dining and wild ingredient sourcing. When I described your work to them, they were immediately interested. I know this is a huge decision. It would mean leaving your home, your established life, everything familiar. It would mean working with me again, navigating whatever complicated feelings we have for each other while trying to build something professional and meaningful. But Bianca, I can't stop thinking about how perfect this could be. Your knowledge combined with my culinary training, your patience combined with my ambition, your deep respect for nature combined with my desire to share that respect with others through food. I'm not asking you to give me an answer immediately. I'm not even sure what I'm asking for in terms of our personal relationship. All I know is that I found something here that could be extraordinary, but it would only be truly meaningful if I could share it with you. The position would provide relocation assistance, a generous salary, and the opportunity to develop your own programs. More importantly, it would give us a chance to create something together that could influence how people think about food, about sustainability, about the relationship between human culture and natural systems. Take your time thinking about it, but please think about it. All my love, Angela. Enclosed with a letter were photographs of a beautiful space in the Murray District high ceilings, exposed beams, large windows that would be perfect for drying mushrooms and herbs. There was also a rough sketch of how the space might be configured: dining room, teaching kitchen, workshop space for foraging classes. But what moved Bianca most was the final photograph. Angela standing in an empty room, her arms spread wide, her face radiant with possibility. Written on the back, in Angela's careful handwriting, were the words, "This could be ours." Bianca spent the next 2 weeks walking longer distances than usual, carrying Angela's letter folded in her jacket pocket like a talisman. She found herself stopping at places that held particular significance: the grove where she had first found Matsutake, the meadow where she taught foraging classes, the overlook where she and Angela had shared their first kiss. Each location seemed to offer its own counsel. The forest whispered about the importance of seasonal change, about the way even ancient trees must adapt to new conditions to survive. The ocean reminded her that some currents run deep enough to connect distant shores. The mountains suggested that the most meaningful journeys often require leaving familiar territory, but it was a conversation with her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chun, that provided the clarity she needed. "You've been different since that young woman left," Mrs. Chun observed as they stood at the boundary between their properties, watching fog roll in from the ocean. "Sadder, but also more awake, if that makes sense." "It makes perfect sense," Bianca replied. "I think I'd been sleepwalking through my life until she arrived." Mrs. Chun nodded thoughtfully. "My husband and I were 17 years apart in age. People talked, especially in the beginning. But we had 53 years together before he passed, and every year was better than the last." "You want to know why?" Bianca waited, sensing wisdom in the making. "Because we both chose to grow toward each other instead of allowing the world to pull us apart. Age is just time, Bianca. But connection, real connection between souls, that's rare and precious. And not to be wasted because other people don't understand it." That evening, Bianca sat down to write her response. Asterisk, "My darling Angela." She wrote, "Your proposition is indeed crazy, wonderfully, thrillingly, perfectly crazy, in the way that all the best adventures are. I've spent the last 2 weeks asking myself every practical question. Can I leave the home I've built here? Can I navigate life in a foreign country? Can I work closely with you without our personal feelings complicating everything? Can I trust that this opportunity is real and not just the romantic fantasy of two women who miss each other?" The practical answers are mixed. Yes, I can leave. I've realized that home is less about place than about purpose and connection. Maybe I can adapt to Paris. I'm more resilient than I sometimes give myself credit for. Definitely our personal feelings will complicate things, but maybe complication isn't the worst thing in the world. And absolutely, I trust you, not just your professional judgment, but your heart, your intentions, your capacity to see possibilities that others miss. But here's what I've realized matters more than any practical consideration. I love you. Not just the chemistry between us, not just the intellectual connection, not just the way you make me feel more alive than I've felt in years. I love who you are, your ambition tempered with respect, your youth balanced with wisdom, your talent combined with genuine desire to create something meaningful. I love you enough to take this crazy leap. I love you enough to believe that whatever challenges we face, we can face them together. I love you enough to trust that two women who can create magic with mushrooms and moonlight can probably figure out how to build a sustainable business and relationship in Paris. So, yes, my answer is yes to all of it. Yes to Paris, yes to the restaurant, yes to the educational programs, yes to writing a book, yes to building something extraordinary together. Yes to whatever this is between us, whether we call it partnership, or collaboration, or love, or all three. I'll begin making arrangements to close up my life here. I'll need a few months to organize everything properly, finding homes for my specimens that can't travel, arranging for someone to maintain my cottage, completing my current commitments. But by spring, if your offer still stands, I'll be ready for the next chapter of our story. Thank you for seeing possibilities I couldn't see myself. Thank you for being brave enough to ask for what seemed impossible. Thank you for showing me that love doesn't have to be small or safe or convenient to be real. Until Paris, all my love, Bianca. P.S. I've enclosed some dried chanterelles from this season's foraging. Make something beautiful with them and think of me. Asterisk. Bianca's arrival in Paris coincided with the first warm days of spring, when the city seemed to shimmer with possibility, and the markets overflowed with ingredients that spoke of renewal and growth. Angela met her at Charles de Gaulle Airport, both women suddenly shy after months of intimate correspondence, unsure how to navigate the transition from letters to presents. But when Angela stepped forward and wrapped her arms around when Bianca inhaled the familiar scent of herbs and determination that seemed to cling to Angela's hair, the awkwardness dissolved into something deeper: homecoming, recognition, the sense of two puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Welcome to our adventure, Angela whispered against her ear, and Bianca felt the last of her reservations evaporate like morning mist. The space Angela had found exceeded even the photographs. High-ceilinged and flooded with natural light, it offered endless possibilities for the hybrid restaurant school laboratory they envisioned. Bianca walked through each room slowly, her mycologist's eye already imagining how the space could be transformed: display cases for preserved specimens, a library corner for reference books, teaching stations where students could learn to identify edible versus poisonous species. What do you think? Angela asked, unable to hide her anxiety as she watched Bianca's careful inspection. I think, Bianca said slowly, running her hand along the exposed beam that would be perfect for hanging drying herbs, that we're going to need more mushrooms than Paris has ever seen. Asterisk. What followed was a period of intense collaboration that tested and strengthened every aspect of their relationship. They worked 18-hour days, transforming empty space into something unprecedented in the Paris dining scene. Angela's culinary vision merged seamlessly with Bianca's educational expertise, creating a concept that was part restaurant, part classroom, part laboratory. They sourced equipment together, negotiated with suppliers, developed curricula for foraging, classes that would satisfy both amateur enthusiasts and professional chefs. Bianca's patient teaching style proved the perfect complement to Angela's innovative cooking, and watching her work with students explaining the subtle differences between mushroom varieties with the same care she had once shown to Angela herself made Angela fell in love with her all over again. The romantic aspect of their relationship evolved naturally alongside their professional partnership. They rented a small apartment in the Marais, with a tiny kitchen where they tested recipes, and a balcony garden where Bianca grew herbs and cultivated mushroom specimens. Their age difference, which had seemed so significant in the scrutiny of small-town gossip, became irrelevant in the cosmopolitan anonymity of Paris. I have something to confess, Angela said one evening as they sat on their balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and planning the next day's menu testing. Only one something, Bianca teased. I'm disappointed in your lack of secrets. I was terrified when I first wrote to you about this opportunity, Angela continued seriously. Not about the business aspects, but about whether you would think I was just a foolish young woman chasing impossible dreams. Bianca set down her wine glass and took Angela's hands in her own, those skilled chef hands that had first caught her attention, now familiar and precious beyond measure. You are a foolish young woman chasing impossible dreams, she said gently. Thank goodness. The world needs more foolish young women who believe impossible dreams are worth pursuing, and it needs older women who are brave enough to follow them. L'école Sauvage, the wild school, opened on a warm June evening to a carefully curated crowd of food critics, fellow chefs, and mycology enthusiasts. Bianca had spent weeks preparing educational materials, creating displays that would help diners understand the journey each ingredient had taken from forest floor to plate. Angela's menu was a love letter to everything. They had learned together dishes that highlighted the unique characteristics of various mushroom species, preparations that honored both classical French technique and the intuitive approaches Bianca had taught her. Each course was accompanied by brief educational presentations where Bianca shared the stories behind the ingredients, the ecological relationships that made each dish possible, the sustainable practices that ensured future harvests. The evenings highlight was a dish Angela had developed specifically for the opening, matsutake prepared 3 ways, each method designed to highlight different aspects of the mushroom's complex flavor profile. As she presented the dish, Angela spoke about her mentor, the woman who had taught her to listen to ingredients, to respect their origins, to understand that cooking was ultimately an act of translation between human culture and natural systems. This restaurant exists, Angela concluded, because someone showed me that the most important ingredient in any dish is knowledge, and the most important tool in any kitchen is respect. Tonight, we share both with you. Watching from the dining room, Bianca felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sentimentality, but from the recognition that they had actually achieved something remarkable. They had created a space where education and cuisine enhanced each other, where diners left not just satisfied but enlightened, where the mysteries of mycology became accessible without being diminished. Asterisk. The reviews that followed exceeded their most optimistic projections. Le Figaro called L'école Sauvage a revolutionary approach to dining education that never forgets that learning should be delicious. Food and Wine featured them in a cover story about innovative restaurant concepts, praising their ability to make complex scientific information engaging and accessible. But the review that meant the most to both women came from an unexpected source, a mycology journal that rarely covered restaurants. The reviewer, herself a forest ecologist, wrote, L'école Sauvage represents something unprecedented in the intersection of science and cuisine. Chef Angela Parker's technical skill is matched by her genuine reverence for ingredients, while mycologist Bianca Jones has created educational experiences that could revolutionize public understanding of forest ecology. Together, they have proven that fine dining can be a vehicle for environmental education without sacrificing sophistication or flavor. This is what the future of responsible gastronomy looks like. More meaningful than reviews, however, were the students who began attending Bianca's foraging classes. Professional chefs came to deepen their understanding of wild ingredients. Home cooks arrived curious about sustainable food sourcing. Families enrolled to learn about the ecosystems that surrounded them but remained largely invisible. Bianca worked with these diverse groups. Angela was struck by how perfectly her partner had found her calling. The careful patience that had once seemed like resignation now revealed itself as wisdom, the understanding that real learning takes time, that trust must be earned, that the best teaching happens when students feel safe to ask questions and make mistakes. Asterisk. Their first year in operation brought challenges neither had anticipated: supply chain disruptions that required creative sourcing, language barriers that complicated communication with certain vendors, the inevitable growing pains of any new business. But it also brought joys that exceeded their wildest expectations. They developed relationships with foragers throughout France, creating a network of suppliers who shared their commitment to sustainable harvesting. Bianca's French improved rapidly as she learned to conduct tours and classes in her adopted language, while Angela's cooking evolved to incorporate techniques and ingredients specific to their European location. Most importantly, their relationship deepened beyond the initial chemistry that had brought them together. They learned to navigate disagreements professionally without letting them spill over into their personal life. They discovered that their different approaches to problem solving, Angela's quick decisiveness, balanced by Bianca's careful consideration, made them a formidable team. Do you ever miss California? Angela asked one evening as they walked along the Seine. Autumn air carrying the scent of changing leaves. Bianca considered the question seriously. I miss the specific forests I knew, she replied. I miss the familiar rhythm of my old life. But missing something isn't the same as regretting leaving it behind. I've learned more about myself in this past year than I learned in the previous 10. You showed me that growth doesn't stop at 45, sometimes it's just beginning. Asterisk on. Their first anniversary of opening Le Col Sauvage, Angela planned an elaborate celebration dinner featuring ingredients from every region they had sourced from during their inaugural year. The meal was a journey through their shared experiences, each course representing a milestone in both their business and their relationship. As they reached dessert, a delicate confection featuring honey mushrooms and lavender that somehow managed to be both earthy and ethereal. Angela reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Bianca's breath caught, her mind racing through a dozen assumptions about what was happening, what was expected of her, how to respond to a gesture that felt both thrilling and terrifying. But when Angela opened the box, instead of a ring, it contained two small, perfectly preserved mushroom specimens, matsutake, identical to the ones they had shared on that first magical evening in Bianca's cottage. "I'm not proposing marriage," Angela said softly, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm proposing partnership in every sense of the word. These mushrooms represent where we started and everything we've grown into together." Bianca reached across the table, taking Angela's hands in her weathered ones. "Yes," she whispered, understanding completely. "To all of it. Always yes." The old man sets down his empty teacup, his eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of a story well told. "And that, dear ones, is how love blooms, not despite our differences, but because of them. In patience, in respect, in the willingness to grow toward each other across any distance." He smiles, the firelight dancing across his weathered face. "Some stories end. Others simply begin again, season after season, like the forest itself."